Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church, and I'm here today to continue my conversation about a fellow named David. Now, when we last looked at David in 1 Samuel 16, Samuel had anointed him the new king. Of course, there was already a king. His name was Saul. But God had told Samuel he wasn't respectful of Saul anymore. You can look that up if you want. It's 1 Samuel 15, that chapter. But I want to skip over now to the next time we hear about David. Now, he gets anointed king, but doesn't do anything. Nothing happens, which is understandable. Like I said, they already have a king. His name's Saul. He's a pretty powerful king. And that's not in the cards, as they say. So the next time we hear about this guy, David, is in the 17th chapter of 1 Samuel. And it's in relationship to a fellow named Goliath. And you've probably heard that story. If you haven't, just read chapter 17 of 1 Samuel. You'll get it. Basically, you got this giant of a guy that nobody in Saul's army is willing to fight. And David volunteers. So let's see here. 1 Samuel 17 and verse 32. David tells Saul, the king, don't worry about that Philistine. I'll fight him. And Saul replies, don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. You're only a boy. Saul sees David with his physical eyes, and he sees a scrawny little kid, maybe 16, 17 years old. And he looks across the battlefield and he sees this giant of a man, probably 8 feet tall or close to it. And nobody wants to fight him. Nobody even dares think about doing that till David comes around. He's gone to visit his brothers who are at the war front. He hears Saul booming, and everybody says, oh, well, that's Goliath. He's challenging us, and we're too afraid to fight him and whatnot. So David says, I'll do it. I'll fight him. and then we read this about Saul. Saul finally consented to David fighting him. And he says, may the Lord be with you. I almost think that's kind of a ridicule kind of a statement. He's pretty sure that David can't win. So what does he do? Well, if you look at verse 38 of chapter 17, it says, then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped the sword on, took a step or two to see what it was like, for he never won such things before. And then he goes back to Saul and says, I can't go in this stuff. Now, Saul, I don't know if he really thought he was helping. I assume he does. I'm not really sure what's going on here, because it ought to be obvious to everybody that David can't wear Saul's armor. David's a boy, Saul's a grown man. He won't fit. And David puts it on, he can't move. So he throws it off. And he goes out and fights Goliath. And he wins. And then the Israelis attack the Philistines, and they win. Now, at this point in time, you would think everything's great between Saul and David. Even though Saul hadn't known this guy before, does not know that Samuel has anointed him the next king. He's just thrilled. They've won the war. Until, now, here's what happens. We skip over to chapter 18. beginning with verse 6. And it says, when the victorious Israeli army was returning home after David had killed the Philistine, women from all the towns of Israel came out to greet and meet King Saul. They sang and danced for joy with tambourines and cymbals, and that would be typical of what you would do when the general or the guy in charge comes home after a big military victory. But here's what the women are saying. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. This made Saul very angry. He gets mad because David is credited with killing more people than he did. Now, Saul, I don't know how to say this. He was obviously a very capable man of ruling Israel, but he fell away from what God wanted, and he did some things that weren't acceptable in God's sight. And knowing that was going to happen, Samuel anoints David to take his place when all of that shakes out. But when he hears that David is getting more credit for the victory than he is, he gets mad. Just gets mad. In fact, it says in verse 8, this made Saul very angry. What is this? He says. They credit David with tens of thousands and me only with 8,000. Next, they'll be making him their king. And from that day on, Saul kept a jealous eye on Judah and David. David is the object of ridicule and anger by Saul. He hadn't done anything except fight the Philistine. Now, Saul could have fought him. He had the opportunity to. So why didn't he? Well, we obviously don't know that. But what we do know is that David had the courage and the faith to take on the giant, and Saul didn't have it. And then when David gets boosted up for his accomplishments, Saul gets mad. You have two quick things at work here for this devotion and this couple of weeks. The first thing you have is the devotion of David to God. He takes on a giant, literally, not just figuratively. He takes on a giant and he wins because he trusts God. Then you have Saul, who didn't take on the giant, but could have. And he's jealous and angry of what David did. You know, walking with God is not necessarily going to win you friends. It's not going to win you admirers. I mean, it might, but it's also going to make you some enemies. You know, a lot of people in this world who are just waiting to see Christians fall. And they're looking at you too. So you got to decide before it comes, are you going to be the man who trusts God or the woman, the person, or are you going to be the one who doesn't and then gets angry because someone else is? Do you think about that one? I'm going to leave you hanging right there. I'll have some more to say about it tomorrow. Thanks for listening. I know you don't have to. If you have a need or a concern, let us know. We'll do whatever we can as fast as we can to help meet your need. God bless you. I'll talk to you tomorrow.